We tend to think of our bodies in neat little boxes. The brain's in the skull, the lungs are in the chest, and so on. But what about that all-important real estate between the lungs? Today, we're taking a little expedition into a region that's not really an organ itself, but more like a bustling central station, just packed with some of the most vital machinery you own. So, really think about your chest for a second. You've got the lungs, right? One on each side. But what's actually going on in the space between them? Is it just nothing? Just some empty space to keep them from bumping into each other? Well, as you're about to see, the answer is a huge no. It is anything but empty. In fact, that space is absolutely crammed with life-sustaining hardware. It's this incredibly organized compartment that acts as a highway, a shield, and a housing unit, all at the same time. And that's exactly where we're headed in this explainer. All right, so let's start by giving this place its proper name and figuring out exactly what its territory is. It's called the mediastinum, and that name actually makes perfect sense. It literally means midway, because that's what it is. It's the central compartment of your chest, and it holds basically everything in your thorax except for your lungs. The best way to think of it is like the downtown core of your upper body. So to really understand this area, we're going to need a map. Let's take a look at its boundaries and how anatomists divide it all up to make sense of this really complex neighborhood. To get a handle on the sidewalls of the mediastinum, this analogy is just perfect. Your lungs aren't technically floating inside these pleural sacs. Instead, they push into them, kind of like you'd push your fist into a water balloon. So these balloons are what form the left and right walls of the mediastinum, creating this perfect separation from the lungs. Now, to keep things nice and organized, the mediastinum is split into two main zones. You've got an upper part, called the superior region, and a lower part, the inferior. And it's all divided by one simple horizontal line. And this shows that dividing line perfectly. It's an imaginary line, of course, called the transverse thoracic plane. It runs from the sternal angle, that's that little bony bump where your upper ribs meet your breastbone, all the way back to your spine. And trust me, this plane is a super important landmark where a ton of things happen. All right, so now let's see what's actually in this space. Because this isn't just a container, It's a major crossroads, a transit hub for the body's most essential highways. That superior mediastinum, the part above the line we just drew, is incredibly crowded. I mean, you've got the massive arch of the aorta with its main branches shooting off. You've got the superior vena cava bringing blood back, major nerves crisscrossing all over the place, the trachea, the esophagus. It's got to be a traffic director's nightmare, but it's an absolute anatomical marvel. And the navigation in here has to be so precise. I mean, just look at the different paths the right and left vagus nerves take. The left nerve has to swing all the way around the aortic arch, while the right nerve takes a more direct route past the trachea. It really shows you just how complex the 3D layout is in such a tight space. Now, below that main dividing line, the inferior mediastinum is split into three more zones, and it's all relative to the heart. You've got the part in front, the part behind, and, well, the part that holds the main event itself. And that, of course, brings us to the city center, the absolute core of the mediastinum, the middle compartment, which is home to the heart. And here it is, a real anatomical view. The heart sits right there in the middle mediastinum, all wrapped up in a tough protective bag called the pericardium. This sac is what anchors the heart in place and shields it from things like infection and from getting too big. And if we zoom in on that protective sac, you'll see it's not just one layer. There's a tough outer part and then two really delicate inner layers. Between those inner layers is a tiny bit of fluid which acts as a lubricant. It lets the heart beat millions and millions of times without any friction. It's just an incredibly smart design. So let's quickly trace the path of blood through this amazing engine. Blood with no oxygen comes in from the body to the right atrium, then goes down to the right ventricle, which pumps it out to the lungs. It comes back, now full of fresh oxygen, into the left atrium, down to the super powerful left ventricle, and then bam! It's pumped out through the aorta to the rest of the body. It is a perfect continuous loop. Now, that whole cycle is controlled by 4 valves. But have you ever stopped to wonder, how can a doctor listen to each of those 4 valves separately with a stethoscope? I mean, they're all packed so close together inside the heart. How does that even work? Well, this is just brilliant. The sound of each valve closing doesn't actually stay where the valve is. The flow of blood projects that sound to very specific spots on the chest wall. So a doctor isn't listening to the valve's location, they're listening to where the sound travels to. It's a perfect example of how knowing anatomy directly makes modern medicine possible.
Okay, so we've established this is a critical, tightly packed space. But what happens when that spacing goes wrong? What does it actually mean when this central region starts to get bigger?
In medicine, there's a term for it, a widened mediastinum. And on a chest x-ray, if that central shadow looks abnormally wide, it is a major red flag that something is seriously wrong on the inside. The clinical rule of thumb on a standard upright chest x-ray is a width greater than 6 centimeters. It's such a simple measurement, but it's one that can signal a life-threatening emergency. And this list of potential causes shows exactly why it's taken so seriously. We're talking about things like a ruptured aorta, severe infections, major trauma from fractures, or a rupture in the esophagus. I mean, nearly every single cause is a medical emergency that needs immediate attention.
So in the end, the mediastinum is so much more than just the space between our lungs. It's the central transit station, it's the highway interchange, and it's the downtown core of our entire thorax. And as we've seen, just like any central hub, if there's a traffic jam, that problem doesn't just stay there. It can cause a catastrophic pileup for the entire system.